Welcome back to our next episode of the Doggone Truth About Rescue with Always and Furever. I hope everyone had a fantastic holiday and was able to spend time with family, friends, and your pups. And I'm just going to go right into it with Sai had a special guest with her house over the holidays, and it's kind of the topic of today's podcast of Tobin, who is recently a hospice dog, and it's going to be what we're talking about tonight. So, Sai, would you like to introduce our two guests?
Today we have Nicole Boxx. Jill, I didn't catch your last name.
Recker.
Jill Recker. Thank you guys for joining us today. Let's start off with you guys introducing yourselves. How did you find Always and Furever? Do you have a full-time job? What is your role in Always and Furever?
Well, this is Jill, and I found Always and Furever when I had just lost my senior dog, and I'd had her for 15 years, and she was my first love, and somebody had shared a link with me about Always and Furever, that they specialize in senior dogs. So I kind of started following them, and a few months later got my first hospice dog. And I do have a full-time job. I work in human hospice. I'm the executive director of Ascend Hospice here in Kansas City.
My name is Nicole. I have been with Always and Furever a little over 4 years. I found them. A friend of mine adopted a dog and put me down as a reference. So got to talking to them, went to volunteer orientation. I do have a full-time job, but I actually was on the staff at Always and Furever for about a year and a half at the Little Red Barn. Worked every weekend over COVID. And then I did a part-time medical coordinator for about 6 months. Loved that. And then now I do all of the volunteer orientations out of the Little Red Barn. So I'm out there one Saturday and one Sunday each month.
Well, thank you for both coming out tonight. I know this topic isn't necessarily always easy to talk about, but it's very important, and especially if you do it all day at work and then also have hospice animals at home. Can you kind of just give a brief overview of what is hospice and what is the factor of being considered hospice or not, especially with Always and Furever of, like you said, they focus on senior dogs, but not all senior dogs are hospice.
Yeah, so I think of hospice as, a dog or a human that has a terminal diagnosis. It's not treatable, or maybe it's not the most humane thing to treat, that maybe living out their life with whatever quality we can give them is in the best interest of the dog. So sometimes dogs come to Always and Furever with a lot of medical issues, or things that have just not been treated along the way, and so sometimes they come to the rescue as hospice. So they're just gonna try to find a foster that can let them live out whatever life they have left.
So Jill, you've mentioned that you have fostered hospice dogs in the past. Can you kind of go into detail of the different mindset, and maybe it comes easier for you since you are in it all day as well at work and then go home, or is it more difficult that you don't get a break from it, should I say?
I don't necessarily think it's more difficult not getting a break from it. I genuinely believe that leaving this earth can be just as beautiful as when we come into it. With the dogs, it's a little bit different because, we don't necessarily know their history. We don't know, really where they came from, what they're going to be like in a home always. Always and Furever does a great job of doing whatever kind of testing they can do with people and dogs and things like that. But it's kind of you learn with the dog. My first hospice foster was Tia. She came from Louisiana. She had really what was literally like a bowling ball sized tumor hanging from her stomach. She had BBs in her. We don't know what her life was like before she came to Always and Furever. She had heartworms. Couldn't do the surgery to get rid of the tumor because she couldn't tolerate the anesthesia with the heartworms. We couldn't do the heartworm treatment because of the tumor. And so, she just came to me and was full of life. You would have never known that she had all these things wrong with her. We got like a pregnancy belly band, like this extra small one that held her tumor up so she could fly in and out of the dog door with the other dogs. Unfortunately, I only had her for about 6 weeks. We had to end up saying goodbye to her from pyometria, which is, an infection that dogs get in their uterus from not being spayed. So it's like after all she went through, and a simple spay maybe would have given her a little bit more time with us. So she was my first hospice foster, and, I think the way you handle it is knowing that you only have one chance when a dog is at the end of their life, and just giving them whatever love and care that you can. They're so grateful, and they don't need much. I mean, they really don't. We're not talking about a lot of really complicated, medical stuff. Sometimes it is, but, usually it's just literally a soft place to land and maybe some medication that you find ways to get them to eat it, whether it's a treat or chicken or anything. My hospice dogs get a lot of steak. Most of them like it medium rare, but they usually don't groan too much if it comes out medium. So that was my first hospice foster almost 4 years ago. After that, I got Brazil. She came as a pair with Peru, but Brazil was so critical and so fragile. She had a horrible case of pneumonia, and we really didn't know what else she had. So Peru got adopted, and Brazil came home with me and really could only walk a few feet at a time, and she'd have to sit and take a break. So we kind of joked that her dog bed in our bedroom was like her studio apartment. So she ate there, she slept there, and then she started learning the dog door, and the antibiotics kind of really started working. So she ended up kind of almost not being hospice, but she had a lot of mobility issues, so she kind of stayed with me and finally said goodbye to her 2.5 years later. But Peru's mom would bring her to visit, and when they would see each other, their tails would wag, and they never forgot, that's for sure. And then my next hospice foster was Ego, and he's a little famous. I think a lot of people that follow Always and Forever know Ego from his big Sasquatch feet. He came and, he was, fragile, but not super sick. But a few months after I had him, he was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And, we had him for about 9 months after that. And, he just wanted to be loved. He was cautious of people, but once you gained his trust, he was yours forever. And I got a lot of support from Always and Forever. If we had to go out of town, which we only did twice when we had him, but that's kind of a beautiful thing about Always and Forever, I think, is the support that you get from the other fosters and the organization in general, that we couldn't leave Ego with just anybody. So a few folks from the rescue would stay at our house to take care of him if we had to leave town. So Ego, we said goodbye to him in August of this year of 23. And we had a few months without any dog in our house, which was the first time for me in over 20 years to not have a dog in the house. And then recently, Madge came to live with us, and she has a lot going on too. She's got a mass on her neck, and what we thought was a splenic mass, but turned into be a liver mass. So her time with us is pretty limited, but she doesn't know it. So we pretend like we don't know it either.
How do you deal with the inevitable of knowing that they're hospice and they're going to pass at some point? More so, I think my question is, how much time do you give yourself to process it before bringing another dog in? Obviously, you said one you had for 6 weeks. The other one was 2.5 years. So you get a bigger bond. Does time really make a difference, or is it just a connection you have with the dog?
I don't know that time makes as big of a difference. I mean, I suppose it does. When you have a dog for longer, they become part of your routine for longer. I look at it like it's not about me as much. It's about what can we do for that dog in the last, whether it's days, weeks, months, or maybe years of their life. And, I guess I cope with it by just really accepting the fact that death is inevitable. But for these dogs, they haven't had a great life necessarily before they came to Always and Forever. And so it's kind of, like this challenge and mission to give them everything that they should have had for all those years in whatever time you have with them. And, they truly don't need a lot. Dogs that are older, they sleep a lot. They, don't necessarily need an active home. They just need somebody to love them and give them good food and whatever health care that they need to be comfortable.
I find it ironic that we're doing this episode. Like, it kind of came up out of nowhere for us to do this episode. But looking back, I think today it was a year ago that Libby passed. And then a few days ago that Bailey, my hospice, had passed. And so it's almost like that time stamp of just bringing it up and talking about it again and bringing awareness to it. The hardest part for me with Bailey was when they found the tumor on her spleen. And it was, well, you could have days, weeks, months of not having a timeline at all. I was fortunate enough to get another 8 months after they found it. But what advice do you give to potential fosters of hospice dogs on managing expectations of a timeline?
I think the unknown is often a lot harder than the known. Just that wondering of how much time do I have left. I guess it kind of goes back to that quality over quantity. where really the focus should be on whatever time they have left. And I think in my experience, and I kind of talked about some of the longevity of, most of my fosters, they may have a prognosis of like a few weeks, but they tend to usually live a lot longer, once they're comfortable in a home and they feel safe and they don't have the vulnerability of a loud, noisy shelter, and they really can kind of relax and ease into this last phase of their life. So I do think the unknown is harder than the known, and I think as humans we naturally kind of want to know A, B, C, D, what to expect. And I think just kind of really accepting that the timeline isn't really what's important, but what we're going to do with that timeline is really better to keep that focus on.
I'm just taking this all in because I'm listening to you, and I have Tobin at home who's a hospice, and I'm like, Tobin's living his life right now. He's living his best life. He is being spoiled, though I do have to kennel him because he likes to run everywhere, and I'm like, dude, if you don't go rest, go sit down somewhere. So thank you for that.
I think that's the hard part too of being a foster for hospice, is not knowing, like when you sign up to foster a hospice, in your head you might think it's going to be, unfortunately, a short time frame, but then it could turn into, like you said, 2.5 years, and that's not necessarily what you plan, but you fall in love with the dog. I'm not saying, it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So with the hospice dogs that come into Always and Forever, typically I'm going to say these are the dogs that would get put down otherwise if we don't step in. So how do we determine that, I hate to even say this word, worth putting in hospice care, or how other shelters or pounds view them as they should be put down? Where do we decide that line?
Yeah, so I think Jen's vision is always, that they're not in a shelter alone. So we have had dogs that have come, literally, Craig has driven them into Kansas City and has driven them straight to Blue Pearl. We have other dogs that would come to the barn and, try to assess how they're going to be in the barn. Like you said, it can be loud, it can be a lot of stimulation, a lot of different smells, a lot of different people in and out. And then it's determined, let's get them into a home for however long they have. We had a particular dog that came from Hutchinson that Craig picked up. Her name was Belle. It was a yellow lab. And we thought that she would probably have a night. So I offered to take her. Craig brought her to my house, got her there about 9 o'clock. And then Beth, who was the full-time medical coordinator at the time, came over. And the three of us sat with her in the driveway. Her breathing had gotten very labored on the way to my house. And by the time she got there, we spent probably 45 minutes and just determined at that time that it would have been way too much for her to, even if we had lifted her out of Craig's car and then carried her into my home and laid her on a bed. And I had gotten a bed, and I had, planned on spending literally all evening just laying with her. And then it was the plan to take her first thing the next morning. But then it's getting her up off the bed and then putting her in the car and taking her. So after about 45 minutes and seeing how she was, continued to have the labor breathing and you could tell was uncomfortable, we drove her to Blue Pearl. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and, stayed with her for probably an hour, and we were with her when she crossed the bridge. But the purpose of that was, again, it wasn't the quantity, it was the quality, because she didn't pass alone in a cold shelter on the floor. Like she was part of my family. I thought I was going to have her for a night. I only had her for a couple of hours, but still she had a family. And for that, it will rip your heart out 100%. But knowing that you were able to give that to her, like Jill was saying, being able to give them a soft place to lay and we don't know her history. We don't know if she had a family, and then they just said, she's at the end of the life, like we're done with her. But we picked her up, and she was part of our family, and so for that, it was worth it. I always say our hearts break so theirs don't have to, and at least knowing that I'll be able to spend time with her again someday. I feel like I was kind of robbed that time, but it was worth it for me to be robbed of that, to able to give that to her.
As you're talking through that, I'm having flashbacks of Bailey. And I don't think people truly realize or get it until they go through it. And you mentioning of even just moving her, it was going to be too much. And I never believed it when people would tell me, they're like, when you'll know. Like, she'll tell you you will know it's time. And I'm like, no, like I'm just going to miss it. I'm not going to know anything like that. But you truly, you know, and to experience that and feel it, and then to imagine if I wasn't with her, or if she would have experienced it alone or in a shelter. I think that is why Always and Forever's mission statement is what it is. So I just want to say thank you for stepping up and doing that, because it truly is unfathomable, and until you experience it, you can't describe it. I don't want anyone to experience it, but at the same time, like you said, we break our hearts so theirs don't have to. So we do need to experience it. So anyways, I don't know where I'm going to go with that. Like, I don't want people to have to feel that pain, but at the same time, what's the alternative? It's rough. It is rough.
Quick shout out to Kingston. I don't know if you guys hear his paws walking around here.
This is the reverse of our podcast. Usually I'm the one making jokes and Sai's the serious one. Going back to Belle and the short amount of time that you had with her, not all the dogs that come in are that limited due to their health. So once they come in and they're deemed as hospice, what does that whole process look like from them coming to Always and Forever and then finding them a foster with that label?
Yeah, so when we get a new dog in, a lot of times we'll get them from, the Wichita shelter or another shelter, and they have obviously very limited information as far as their history on vaccinations, that sort of thing. So the first thing that we always want to do is get them in for a full evaluation with a vet, blood work, physical, urine sample, all that good stuff. And then once we do that, if something does come back and they've been deemed hospice, then that's usually when our foster team will put out, kind of a 911, like, as much as the Little Gray Barn and the Little Red Barn and Osawatomie, they're fantastic. You go in there and that's their home. It's not a home, right? So we want to get them out of that environment and get them into a home so that they can decompress and have a nice soft bed to lay their head. So, it's usually once we have that initial vet consultation and it's deemed that a dog is hospice, and it's even hard for the vets to say, they might have a month, they might have 3 months. We've had hospice, ask Sarah Mills. She's had several hospice where, she took them in and 2 years later, you still have them. So you really, it's a guessing game to really know how long they have. But, once that initial diagnosis is made that they are hospice, then our foster team, works tirelessly to get them into a home. And we have a handful, like, God bless you, Jill, that's what they do. They're hard to come by because people know, obviously, when you get a hospice dog that, you're setting yourself up to get attached and have your heart broken, and that's a lot to ask of anyone. But we have a small network of hospice fosters that we're always looking for people to do that for these animals. But yeah, once we get that initial diagnosis, then we put out a plea to get them a home for however long they have.
I think it's really important to touch on, once you are a foster, the decision making and how important the medical team is and involved in those decisions, that it's not necessarily all put on your plate. If you could kind of talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I was actually only able to do medical coordinator part-time. I would have done it full-time if I would have been able to do that, but I do, like I said, I do have a full-time job. But the medical team is fantastic. I mean, it is, you can reach out to them day or night with questions, because it can be very overwhelming, right? You took this dog that just had the initial consultation and their hospice, and we know they have X, Y, and Z, but maybe you take them home and then they start exhibiting, this sort of behavior, or start doing, something else. The med team is phenomenal. The nice thing about hospice fostering is that you aren't on your own. You have a whole team of people there that not only we provide all of the supplies, the bed, the food. If you need to take them to the vet, we have vet runners that can do that for you as well if you work and can't do that. But truly, you're never alone. There's always someone there to help answer the question, make a phone call to the vet. It's really a really unique partnership that the med team has with these fosters, especially with the hospice fosters, because there is so much unknown with that. So, for those that might be kind of teetering on whether they want to get involved with being a hospice foster, just know that you're not going to go through it alone. You always have resources, a phone call, a text away, that will drop anything to answer those to help you through that journey.
I don't know if you'll know the answer to this question or not, but it just popped in my head. I've only seen the wording of hospice fosters. Are you able to adopt hospice dogs from Always and Forever? And if you do, is the med team and the resources and everything still handled?
So yes, you can adopt a hospice dog from Always and Forever. I truly believe the reason that a lot of people don't is because when you do adopt them, then you take on all of that medical care, and that can be a huge expense that you have no idea what that looks like. Of course, you would still have access to the med coordinators, and they would be, as helpful as they could. But I think a lot of people shy away from doing that simply because of the cost that's associated with it. When you do the hospice foster, again, Always and Forever, make sure that all of that's taken care of. So you're dealing with a lot of sickness and knowing that it's end of life. For most people, that additional monetary expense since it is so unknown, can be pretty overwhelming. So it certainly is an option. We just don't usually see that as a common practice.
That's what I figured, but put it out there that if you are looking at a hospice dog and are able to take on those monetary expenses, to say that we are willing to take on these costs, because then that moves those finances to another dog's care or another hospice dog coming in. So it is an option, but not necessary. But if you can do it, please do it.
Okay. Yep, 100%.
I'm just curious, how many other rescues do you guys know that does the same thing that Always and Forever? Like, let's use me as an example. I have Tobin. Anytime I need Tobin's meds refill, I hit up Julie, who's on the med team. Tobin's low on Traz. She puts in the order. Being that Blue Springs vet is right down the street, I go pick it up. Or if I'm not able to take Tobin to a vet appointment, there's someone there on the vet rides that are able to come pick up Tobin, take him to his appointment, and bring him back to my house. This is my first time working for a rescue, but do you guys know of any other rescues that do what Always and Forever do? Not that I'm trying to downplay any other rescues.
No, and I think that's what sets Always and Forever
Right.
apart. And I think we need to talk about that more. Even with the free adoption fees, I think it's the fine line of they don't want to advertise it for everybody reaching out, because it is a process to get a dog, but that is a big deal that other
I
dogs
agree.
market on, or other shelters market on, of like, we're waiving the fees this week, this month to clear the shelters. Well, we're always that way. But I think it is that fine line of not bringing in people with the wrong intent, so we don't advertise it as much.
Not only that, people come in to adopt at any time they don't want this dog or cat anymore. Mm-hmm. Always and Forever will always take them back. I love that.
It doesn't matter if you've had them for 3 days or 2 years, which is also why we're always listed second on all of the microchips, is that in the event something happens to your animal and we can't get a hold of you, then they get a hold of us. And prior to working with Always and Forever, I actually had worked with 3 other rescues prior, and those 3 in particular did not do anything like that. So yeah, no adoption fees. It's in the contract that if for whatever reason, there's no questions asked. If you've had it, again, 3 days, 3 years, we've taken dogs back that have been in a home for 2 years. It will break your heart. I have been at the barn more times than I care to count when people have brought dogs back, but you welcome them back, no questions asked, because we don't ever want any one of our animals to be put in a situation where someone has made the decision, I can't care for you anymore, because that we take them back with open arms, and we'll find the right fit. It might take a while, but we'll find the right fit.
Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with absorbing, some of the cost, if some of the fosters do choose to adopt, I've always kind of done a little bit of a hybrid model, I guess. I've had my own resident dogs or other fosters, and I always take care of their own, their food, their beds, things like that, and their meds. I either pick up at the Walmart pharmacy or have Chewy ship it, so it's actually easier for me and more convenient if I do it that way. But I think that is something that is really important for potential fosters to know that, the expense doesn't have to be on you. Oftentimes I will pay their vet bill or, donate, but, if I didn't want to or couldn't, that is a commitment that Always and Forever does make. So you can kind of do a hybrid. They're always really flexible with everything. Yeah, like Nicole said, the support is really incredible. I can speak from the hospice foster point of view on that when you get a dog that you don't really know, you're kind of like, oh gosh, what is this? Is this okay? Is this not okay? There's literally always your med coordinator or somebody that's a text away or a phone call away that can walk you through it. So it can feel kind of ominous to take on a dog that might be complicated medically, that is hospice and kind of terminal. But when I say the support is there, the support is there from multiple people. One thing that I really appreciate about Always and Forever is that the dog is with me 24/7 and they trust me. So when I, mention, oh, this doesn't quite look right, the first thing they say is, okay, well, let's get an appointment, or they start giving ideas. But, you're the one that has the dog and that knows the dog and knows what's normal, what's not normal, and they always trust you. And that is something that I really value with Always and Forever, that my judgment isn't questioned and it's really supported. And that's something that this community of folks in this rescue really bring to the fosters.
And it is such a community, and it brings a different topic to my mind of, say you're not emotionally available to do hospice, but still want to be involved and help out. How are listeners and volunteers able to get involved with picking up the meds or doing the vet runs for hospice dogs if their foster can't, or even like you said, you had some people come in and stay the night, or take the dog when you're traveling out of town. So not fully commit to being a foster, but helping out within the hospice area.
There's a couple different ways. If you want to attend volunteer orientation, which we offer twice a month, that opens you up to, meeting all of the other volunteers. We have a volunteer page that you can join after you go through the orientation. And if people need help getting a dog somewhere, they can take care of that too. We talk a lot about transportation in orientation. We will have some people that come to orientation just for that. We had a lady a couple weeks ago. She lives in Lawrence, just retired school teacher, and that's what she wants to do is just vet runs. And so shout out to Judy, who handles all of the vet runs, always looking for extra help. Just that, because if you think about it, you have upwards of 150 animals in your care at all times. You've got 19 at the barn, you've got 13 at the gray barn, you've got 15 or 16 at Osawatomie. All the rest of those animals are in foster care. And so, sometimes people's work schedules doesn't allow them to get away. So to have, they can do 6, 7, 8 vet runs a day. So just to have that, that help there. But so yeah, they'll pick up, hey, I've got this prescription that's at Walmart, who can come pick it up? And, people will be like, oh, I'll go grab it or whatever. So the volunteer page is where we will post a lot of that stuff, and people just pitch in, all the time and help out with stuff like that.
I have a question. Do any of you two have any pups at home? Any Always and Forevers you guys adopted? Or you guys just foster, hospice?
Outside of hospice. So have you had healthy dogs alongside hospice dogs, and how do you manage your attention between the two?
So I have a 10-year-old lab. So he's my only dog that I've had, but I do have a cat from Always and Forever. Betty White was her name. We got her, Paola Police Department found her. She was a stray. And so she did her stray hold at Osawatomie. It was right after the actress Betty White passed away. So that was her. And what was crazy about her is that she was only like a year old, and she wasn't spayed, but she was declawed in the front. And so when Beth posted her...
Wait, what does that mean?
So she doesn't have any claws in the front. So, back in the day, a lot of people would get their cats, declawed because they tear up furniture but
that's totally mean.
But you can't, and that's just it. So nowadays you can't.
Where were you during our cats episode? We went into detail about that.
Yeah.
Delete my question.
Okay.
Yeah. No. You can't find a vet that will do it because they talk about And so I grew up with cats my whole life, and we always just had the front, never the back, because you wanted to have some sort of protection if they get out, right? And so we had a 20-year-old cat that we had for 19 years. that passed away like 4 years ago. And we've always wanted to get another cat, but I'm like, I cannot have some cat coming in here tearing my shit up, right? So Beth posts her, and she's like, she's a Russian blue, so she's the gray with the big green eyes. And she's like, she's declawed in the front. So, is she really declawed in the front? And she's like, she is. She's a baby. She's like a year old, wasn't spayed, but declawed. And Paola Police Department just found her roaming around the streets. So we went out to PetSmart on a Wednesday, and I'm like, she's coming home with me. And even when I took her to my vet, they were like, that is the craziest thing, because she's so young, not spayed, but declawed in the front. So, ding, ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
I know that's right. Jill?
So I have had other dogs. I've never had a cat because I'm allergic, which I think is the universe's way of saying this is how we'll make sure you don't bring home 5,000 animals. Because I also do have a horse that's kind of hospice now. But so I've only brought home 3 horses before. So that's how my marriage is still intact, because I stopped bringing home horses too. But so with dogs, I've had resident dogs when I first started fostering. And then those, kind of over the years passed away. And so now I've had just Always and Forever dogs for a couple of years now. And like I said, they do as much as they can to see if they're going to be agreeable with other dogs or slow intros and things like that. But I've never had a single problem bringing a dog home and integrating them in the home just because they're hospice. That doesn't, if anything, that probably kind of makes it easier. Their life is slowed down a little bit, so they're maybe not as interested in the other animals as a younger dog might be. So don't let that deter you if you're thinking about hospice fostering.
Before we close up, is there anything else you two would like our listeners to know about hospice fostering?
Just that there's a huge need for that. And again, just knowing that you don't have to go on that journey by yourself. It can be intimidating and scary and the unknowns, but we're always in need of fosters. And again, it's more about letting your heart break so that theirs won't have to, and knowing that you are such a huge part. I loved it when you said earlier about how the end of life can be as beautiful as the beginning, and knowing that you played a part in that by giving them a beautiful ending. Like, what a gift. Such a gift.
I don't think there's anything that it makes it any better for a dog than to know that they left this world with love and kindness and gentleness, and don't be afraid of it. It's sad. I cry every time. I still cry, but it's definitely worth it. They're worth it every time.
I agree. I got Tobin at home right now. I want to thank you two for joining us today. But before we close, is there a hospice foster dog that you guys would like to promote on the cover?
Yeah, for the episode. But I was going to ask before that, do you know off the top of your head how many hospice dogs we currently have with Always and Forever? It's okay if you don't. So are we going with Tobin for the cover dog?
Sure, why not? Let me tell you guys, because so come January, February, March, I'll be traveling for volleyball. Mm-hmm. And so I just feel like it's just too hard, if we can find him a permanent hospice foster, that will work. But I just hate to take him back to Little Great Barn, because he's gotten so comfortable on hopping onto the couches, getting cuddles in.
Getting loved.
Yes.
And not that he doesn't get loved at Little Great Barn, but we all know it's just different.
Yeah,
Family home love.
I agree. And he's such a good dog. Slow intro to males. Tobin and I get our cuddles in. He's very protective when my 16-year-old walks in and try to have a conversation with me.
I want to go into more detail on that, of when you say that, to give the visual representation of what you mean, protective.
Tobin and I are cuddling, and Noah walk in, have a conversation with me, and sit down, and Tobin will growl. I'm like, ooh, yes, I got somebody to protect me. Just, is that what you wanted?
Yeah, because I think sometimes when people think protective, like, is he lunging? Is he
No,
biting?
he's not. No.
Give the actual visual.
Yeah.
I think with Tobin, he's such a special case of coming from Little Gray Barn, needing to be an only dog, also slow intro to males, and then now hospice on top of it.
Right.
Like, it's going to be a special person to step up. For him.
Exactly. Tobin, we've been doing short walks since it's been cold out. I've noticed that the first day it snowed and we try to go out for a long walk, it didn't happen because he started limping on his right leg, and I was like, oh, this is not good. And so we went back in. He does really good. He knows when he needs to go out. He is house trained. I love my Tobin. Tobin is an amazing dog, and I'm so glad that I have him under my care right now. But if he can get a permanent hospice foster,
I know there is a woman out there listening to this podcast that lives alone by herself and is looking for some extra cuddles this winter. Tobin's your guy.
Yeah, that would be me when my kids leave me.
Okay, so we're going with Tobin. That's a little bit about him. I do want to end the episode. We were talking about how somber this topic can be. And obviously we've had more fun episodes, laughable. Some are more informative. Some are more chat side. So let's leave this episode with something positive about hospice. Whoever wants to go first.
I kind of have an analogy.
Sure.
So hospice, hospice dogs aren't dying today, right? They're living. I mean, they run up and down the stairs. They go in out the dog door. They like car rides. They like walks if they can. I mean, they're slower than the other younger dogs, but they're still dogs that just want to be dogs. So talking about how, hospice dogs are really, truly living and enjoying life, I kind of like to compare it to, you kind of work your whole life to make this amount of money, or you can kind of buy a lottery ticket and get all the good stuff at once. I mean, that's kind of what hospice fostering and hospice dogs are. You kind of you don't have the puppies that are chewing stuff up. They're just lovable old dogs that are sick and need someone to love them, but they're still fun. They still want to go get a pup cup. They still want to do all the things that dogs do as much as they can tolerate it. So it's not all gloom and doom, that's for sure.
I would just say that yes, it can be super sad, but just knowing that you were able to give them that gift, it is such a gift knowing that when they do cross the rainbow bridge that they're not alone. And like you said, whether you have them a day or whether you have them 2 years, just knowing that you gave such a selfless gift, to them, I think is enough to just make it worth it.
I'm going to add on to that too. I think we lose focus on how it also changes how you view the world once you are around hospice. And I was just listening to an audiobook the other day, and they talked about the gift of mortality, of when you're around it, you view the world differently, of how short it truly is, and you appreciate each day a little bit more. So when you bring that into your life, there is such a big positive of viewing the world differently, and the small things matter, that you kind of lose perspective of without it. So
when you say that too, it brings up, I always say that it is our job to give them dignity. And again, such a gift that they can't say, I've had enough, it's time. I mean, we have to make that decision for them, but it's our job to give them dignity and to give them that gift.
That is beautifully said. So I want to thank you both for coming out and, like I said, talking about a topic that not a lot of people don't like to talk about, but it should be talked about. It's part of life for every single one of us, whether we choose to deal with it more than others. But we recommend stepping your foot into that, viewing the world a little bit differently and giving the dignity, peace, love, and hope for those dogs that have limited time with us. So thank you for coming out. Sai?
As always, it's never too late for a happily ever after.